Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome aboard. You are right on time. Today, everything you see is for sale as we engage with watches this weekend. Reach out to me, Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for pricing, box papers, accessories, even extra photos of any of the watches you see on today's program. And we are always looking to build inventory. We sell what we buy and we buy what we sell. Sell us a watch or an entire collection. Trade a watch, something you're not wearing, for a new flame. We pay cash, we pay fast, we make the process super easy, and we guide you by hand through the entirety of it. To buy, trade, or sell, reach out to me directly. My email address is tmosso at thewatchbox.com. I usually start with some sort of sports watch because I like to start with the thumbnail watch, and I usually put a clickbait watch in the thumbnail. Today we're going with something that I just happen to adore as our first watch. Launched in 2016 in 218 pieces, this is the 40.5mm white gold Lange Söhne Richard Lange pour le Mérite. The original version of this watch came out in rose gold and platinum back in 2009 with an enamel dial. And while I love enamel dials, I like this combination of a white metal and a black dial better. The original enamel dials were bright white, and frankly, that's more of a dress watch look. This punchy combination of white metal and a black dial can easily be worn casually, and it gives you everything that was great about the original Pour le Mérite Richard Lange. First, 40.5mm in white gold. The dial is made of sterling silver. It's a solid disc of silver, like a coin, that's cut and then galvanized black. The watch does include a hacking seconds function, but you could be deceived by the outward simplicity of the three-hand no-date dial. Let's get closer and see what makes this watch special. Anytime you have a Lange watch that is titled Pour le Mérite, you have a fusée-and-chain constant force device inside the movement. So the way this works is, first, we have a fusée, which is a hyperboloid structure. Think something more or less like a cone with ramps along its side going up in a spiral shape. And there's a chain on that fusée. And then there's also a barrel. And as you wind the watch, the chain winds from the barrel to the fusée. And as the watch unwinds, the chain moves from the fusée to the barrel. As the barrel with the mainspring exhausts its torque and loses its force, the chain runs up the diameter through those ramps along the hyperboloid fusée, gradually pulling a larger and larger diameter of the fusée, just like bicycle gearing, pulling a bigger sprocket on the back to make it easier. So as the mainspring loses force, the fusée system increases the force applied by the mainspring to the drivetrain, with the result that you have constant force to the escapement for all 36 hours of this watch's power reserve, and there's even a planetary differential internally. You can actually see it through the skeletonization in the bridge that allows you to wind the watch without altering the force transmitted to the escapement. The escapement in this watch beats away at 3 hertz, but what really sets the assortment apart here is the use of an overcoil hairspring, which is not universal on Lange watches. This one is designed as a very accurate timekeeper. You can see a black polished swan's neck fine adjustment, black polished ratchet for the barrel so it doesn't run backwards. We have a black polished cap atop the escape wheelcock. We have not one but 2 freehand engraved surfaces in German silver. German silver, the nickel copper zinc alloy, comprises this entire watch. The fusée chain, which you can just barely see as I wind the watch, it's only 1/4 of a millimeter wide. It's comprised of 636 parts, and it's sufficiently strong to suspend 2 kilograms vertically. This is a beautifully intricate watch, and the fusée and the chain, a classical way of maintaining constant force to an escapement. Here we have a rare feature on a Lange, which is a full deployant clasp and upcharge option even on this limited edition Halo watch. And if you're wondering what the significance of 218 pieces was, that was the number of Lange dealers back when this watch came out in 2016. It's much lower now as they've gone almost completely vertical, but charting the changes, that is exactly why the number was chosen, 1 per dealer. Taking a look at it on the wrist, it's not a huge watch. It's more full-sized than oversized. I think you could wear this on a wrist as small as 14 centimeters circumference. You could see on a 16 centimeter circumference wrist, it fits nicely. I've got it strapped down really tight too. You wouldn't wear it this tight, and it'll easily slide underneath a cuff. A very special watch, and as beautifully finished as anything from Lange. You can easily see on the reverse side, when I cant it at a different angle, the quality of the anglage, the engine turning on the base plate, the depth of the engravings, and the combination of both fired blue and black polished screws. All right, so we jump from a watch that is a clear-cut dress model, albeit a sporty one, to a watch that is a sporty sports watch, or perhaps more accurately, the ultimate tool watch of the 1960s and 70s. This is a full box and papers 1971 Rolex 1019 Milgauss. Silver dial with vertical satination. If you look at the hands here, you can see that the hands were media blasted, a very unusual treatment for Rolex hands. The dial is also super clean, and the watch is outstandingly preserved with evidence of the original lug bevels still intact at all four corners, something we rarely see. Now, this watch was sold in 1973, and it comes with everything the original owner received back in the day. Boxes, papers, a brochure specifically detailing the capabilities of the Milgauss, even the original sales documents and warranty cards. This is a full set, 50-year-old, immaculately preserved Rolex Milgauss. Inside caliber 1580, which is a version of the 1570 with a soft iron cage around it to give it its anti-magnetic qualities. The bracelet is contemporary to the watch. I believe it's a 7836 with 358 end links. If you look inside, there we go, you can see that it was made in the fourth quarter of 1970. So this is the correct folded link Rolex bracelet. You could see the reference 7836, 358 end links. This is what came with the watch. And while a lot of 50-year-old bracelets from the folded link era have a lot of play, this one doesn't have much. They always had play coming from the dealers, even the factory back then. But even with the clasp open, this one only has a familiar amount relative to what a new watch would have had in the day. It would have been unusual to have less play back then, and it's unusual today to have so little, as in general, these bracelets don't last if worn constantly. Now, we elected not to touch the finish on this watch, not on the bracelet, not on the case, not on the bezel, not on the clasp, which you can still see has a well-defined Rolex coronet. So this is a 38 millimeter watch. We're not going to touch the finishing of it. We hate the idea of polishing. Throwing it on the wrist, which is 16 centimeters in circumference. You can see it wears larger than the other Rolex watches of the day. Back then, the standard men's size for a Rolex watch was 36 millimeters. And at 38, this was really the same size as even the biggest Rolex sports watches at the time. The GMTs, the Subs, the Daytonas, they were smaller watches back then, and this would have been competitive with their size. Now, I'm going to turn the light off to show you the one thing that has changed with this watch. At some point in its history, it went to Rolex and it got a factory Luminova service dial. So this watch is all Rolex. I just want to clarify that the only part of the watch, including its accessory set, that isn't original to 1971 is that Rolex service replacement dial, which you can see is in unbelievable condition. No marring, no scratches, no scuffs, no oxidation, and it sits underneath a beautifully cambered plexiglass. You can also see at all four corners, the spring bars are nowhere near protruding from the lugs, and that's exactly what you want to see as proof that the case has not been excessively worn or refinished. Jumping into something that is an exotic by Breitling standards, this is the Super Chronomat that came out as a special edition in 2021. It's a big watch, make no mistake, but I'm going to show you what's really special. They've gone full Rolex with a bezel made of solid platinum with a ceramic cap and then an ice blue dial on top of that. 44 millimeters in diameter. The case itself is steel, but this is very much a platinum steel hybrid, and you even see that they use the same captive bezel construction with the bezel resolutely fixed to the case using screws, so it has to be dismantled. It can't be physically knocked off by impact. The strap here is designed to look like the modern Chronomat's reborn rouleau bracelet, and you can see that it closes the gap to the flanks of the case. So even though this is a 22 millimeter lug spacing, you can see the shoulder of the strap actually extends out to the edge of the lugs, so it looks even broader than the broad lug spacing. We have a double trigger, single fold deployant clasp, and you can see the condition of this watch with the original packing and shipping stickers still intact. Flip it all over, you can see the B01 movement, automatic winding, 70-hour power reserve, hacking, quick set, COSC certified Swiss chronometer with column wheel and vertical clutch. It's actually a very good looking movement, and all of this water resistant down to 200 meters, making it an effective dive chronograph. Even though the Chronomat's often associated with flight, this could be your dive watch. You could see the column wheel in action, This watch has some of the finest column wheel feel I've ever encountered. Because of the vertical clutch, there's no jump or extraneous movement to the chronograph seconds hand, and you can leave it engaged full time. The bezel has a wonderfully crisp and sharp 120 click action, and it is a unidirectional bezel with rider tabs that make it easier to manipulate the bezel when your hands are wet, sweaty, or gloved. Again, this is a diving chronograph as well as an aviation watch, and you can see in the darkness the entirety of the dial has been loomed, including the sub-register hands, and we have those vintage-inspired hammerhead indices for the hours. Plus, the bezel has been lit at four corners, making it easy to read elapsed time with precision even in the dark. A very cool watch and one of my favorite modern Breitling releases. The combination of ice blue and the platinum with a B01 movement makes this feel very special, equally as impressive as any Omega. This is a timepiece that has 1 foot in the world of pilot's watches and 1 foot in the world of dive watches. You can wear it on a 16 centimeter circumference wrist like mine, but you need a wrist my size or larger. You don't want to go any smaller with this. Okay, Greubel Forsey. I feel there are some independent brands that are, if anything, underrated at this point. Greubel Forsey is one of them, Lange Söhne is another, Laurent Ferrier is another, and I believe that De Bethune remains a little bit underrated. But what Greubel Forsey has going for it is that its watches are scarcer than just about all of the above. Historically, Greubel would make about one watch per employee, and right through about 150 employees in the last 2 years, that was how many watches they made, meaning in any given year, any particular model might only be made in a few dozen examples. I'm also going to say this, Greubel Forsey after sales prices, if you want to buy pre-owned, you get better value with Greubel than you'll get with the likes of Voutilanen or De Bethune or Journe. This is a watch that won the GPHG Aiguille d'Or back in 2015, the best picture at the Oscars of watchmaking. This is the Greubel Forsey Tourbillon 24-second vision. And as you can see, it has exactly what the name implies. Let's take a look at the back. There's a bubble around a tourbillon that makes one circuit every 24 seconds. So it's moving at more than twice the speed of a conventional tourbillon. It's got an overcoil, it's free sprung, it's 6-position adjusted, it sits on beautifully black polished bridges on each side, and you can see that the tourbillon carriage itself has been intricately and beautifully finished. The reverse of the case, you can see the movement frosted with a wire brush, rhodium plate on a German silver base. The interior angles are incredibly sharp. The bevels are as broad as the Grand Canyon. You can see we have enormous fire-blued screws. The watch is part of a 22-piece limited edition in white gold. The dial is made of solid gold. We have blued hands at center, and it has a remarkable power reserve. To be perfectly honest, 3 days, you can see the power reserve, manual wind, twin barrels, and incredibly animated on the wrist. This is one of the sparest Greubel Forsey designs. It's extravagant, yes, but it's not ostentatious, and it does wear fairly well even on a wrist of my size. It will fit underneath the cuff, being relatively slim. And at 43.5 millimeters in white gold, it wears comfortably and effortlessly. A very special watch. This is the kind of watch that I can't recommend enough. This is the kind of watch that sells for 6 figures below its original retail price. And the quality of what you get here in terms of finishing, it's better than the Mosers, the FP Journes of the world. It's even better than the likes of Laurent Ferrier. Your only peers are going to be the likes of Ferdinand Berthoud, Lange Söhne, Romain Gaultier. We're talking that echelon of finishing, Breguet. And these watches, unlike all of those, these watches are available. If you just want to pay for the watchmaking and the engineering, not for reputation or hype, go with Greubel Forsey. As the company pivots more and more to mass-produced sports watches today, these earlier watches that were built in small batches with a cost-no-object approach, they're going to be worth more. And it's just a blast to own. You show your friend that tourbillon, which is inclined at 25 degrees and making a circuit every 24 seconds, your friend will suddenly understand, even your watch-hating or watch-agnostic friend will suddenly understand what you love about these micro machines. It is beyond belief. Another underrated independent that's actually on its way up is Urban Jurgensen. Traditionally Danish origins but Swiss manufacture. This is the Urban Jurgensen 1142L. It came out in 2015. You can see the design is heavily influenced by Kari Voutilainen, who was involved in the development of the Urban Jurgensen modern day watch line. He liked that partnership so much that he made it permanent, as Voutilainen has now purchased the Urban Jurgensen brand, and it's going to be the complement to his Voutilainen brand. It is going places, and with investment, a savvy business model behind it, and one of the best minds in watchmaking, this is a company that's currently in a buy low standpoint on the pre-owned market. They're going up from here, which is why they're older watches, which you can easily service. They're great to get into because the newer watches are going to be more expensive. So this 1142L gives you a ton. It gives you a solid silver dial that's been cut on a rose lathe. We have a crosshatch pattern. We have satination. We have what's known as a basket weave on the small seconds. The hands, take a good look at them. They're built up from several different parts. In particular, the hour hand, it's fired blue and then it's actually assembled with a gold ring that's internally beveled and polished. So this gold ring is a part that snaps on via pins to the top of the blued steel hour hand. This is a hand guilloche dial and a hand welded case. You can see the lugs were built separately and welded on. There's a lovely tiered profile to the case, both top and bottom. Welding lugs onto a case and then hand finishing to remove the sloppiness of the weld can create a super sharp break between lug and case, but it's laborious, it takes time, and that's why you rarely see it, even on high-end independent watches. Take a look at F.P. Journe's lugs. Those cases are either made through stamping or machining. They're not handcrafted like this. This is a handcrafted dial in a handcrafted case with a handcrafted movement. Here we go. Manual wind P4 caliber, 72-hour twin-barrel power reserve. It's built modern with a full balance bridge and a free-sprung architecture. It's adjusted in 5 positions. It's designed to keep chronometer-grade time. We have a lot to love here. There's a Côte de Soleil sunburst stripe pattern radiating out from the center of the balance. All screw heads have been black polished, as has the ratchet and its click. The bridge itself has been skeletonized to give you a better view of the balance. And then we have a lovely anglage, which is particularly evident from this angle. You can see the edges of the bridges, including the balance bridge, lighting up. Truly special stuff with a movement that's properly sized for this 42mm rose gold case. As you can see on the wrist, it looks a lot like a Voutilainen, and it's a thin watch, easily sliding underneath the cuff, both because it's slender and because its case flank is sloped. This is a handsome all-around dress timepiece that, frankly, is more interesting than the 3-hand time-only watches you can get from the likes of AP, Patek, and Vacheron these days. This is something very special, very rare, from a brand that, due to its new backing and ownership, will always be around to provide parts and service. Speaking of underrated brands, Breguet is not an independent, but I don't think any company in watchmaking is more heavily invested in fine finish engineering and craft arts without receiving the necessary recognition. This is the Breguet Classique Tourbillon 3657 PT in platinum. It's 39mm in diameter. Let's start from the outside and work our way in. First, the strap is attached to the case using screws and bars. Big upgrade over spring bars. Second, welded lugs. You can see that super sharp break between lug and case. Third, cold rolled case flanks that are then hand finished to achieve this neat and tidy coining. Look at the attention to detail. A little kerf underneath the crown so you can more easily dig your nail in to pull the crown out. Flanged and double-domed bezel, giving way to a solid gold dial that's been turned on a rose lathe. We have everything here. We have clou de Paris, we have satination, we have a rosette on the power reserve indicator, we have a dental-type molding outboard. Look at the details here. All of it silvered white after being cut on rose lathes and straight line machines. So this is a solid gold dial that's been hand-cut guilloche main, that's what it says at the base of the dial. This is the hand-guided lathe, not some sort of drill system, not stamped guilloche, not something cut with a laser. We have fire-blued steel hands here, including Breguet hands for the hours and minutes. Note the secret signature between 1 and 2 and 10 and 11. We have a power reserve indicator over here for the manual wind 50 to 55 hour power reserve. We have an AM PM indicator right here, and the way this works is when you set the watch, it disengages, but it lets you know what you're looking at. And as you can see, this is going to be 9 a.m. because you can see that the hand is just short of 10, so we're looking at 9 a.m., not 9 p.m. And it's a lot of fun to set the time on this watch because you have that fascinating retrograde AM PM system. Now, what else is going on? Plenty. The tourbillon is free-sprung with an overcoil, and it doubles as your seconds hand for the watch. The bridge as well as the carriage have been beveled, satinated, and polished, as well as the screws themselves. It's a manual wind 50-hour power reserve, this caliber, the 560.1, extravagantly freehand engraved. All of this banknote scrolling, this florizan pattern, has been done without any kind of a tool other than a burin and eye-hand coordination. The date listed here corresponds to June 26th, 1801, which was the official day of the patent of the Breguet tourbillon. In truth, he'd built tourbillon as far back as 1795, but officially this, in the revolutionary calendar of the contemporary French, this is the date of the tourbillon patent. You could see the name as well as the number freehand engraved, 6 position adjusted, a superior standard, and if you look carefully, there is some mirrored anglage here, including interior angles. There's not a whole lot of edges to these bridges, but if you look, that has been respected as well. All of the bevels are broad, mirrored, and beautiful. This is a very special watch. We've got interior angles here, 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 here. Lots to love. Handcrafted case, dial, movement, and very attractively priced. It has a full platinum clasp on the wrist. It's got an impressive weight despite not being a big watch. You can see how flat it is. It's easy to fit underneath the cuff. And again, underrated. Breguet does its case manufacture, its dial manufacturing, its movement decoration. If you got all of this in a Patek Philippe, it would cost $200,000, and you'd have to apply to buy it. This you can buy right now. So we talked about how Urban Jurgensen is coming back, having been purchased by Kari Voutilainen. Well, Daniel Roth is also coming back, and it's a passion project of new Louis Vuitton watchmaking chief, Jean Arnault. He's bringing Daniel Roth back, and this right here is a fantastic example of what the brand did so well before it was folded into Bulgari in the mid-2010s. Ellipso Curvex case, welded lugs, white gold, 38 millimeters across, 45.5 millimeters lug to lug, a 2-piece engraved gold dial. So we have this frontispiece or grill over a incredibly deeply engraved rayon or sunburst pattern. This is not the kind of sunburst laid down by an abrasive wheel. This is deeply evacuated by a graver. Now you can see it has a retrograding date. This is the tourbillon date, and it lives up to its name. Its basic movement drivetrain is from Lemagne, but the tourbillons of Lemagne, developed in the 80s, were designed by the name of the man on this dial. So this is really his architecture. We have a 1-minute tourbillon that doubles as the seconds hand for the watch. When we turn it all over, you can see we have a power reserve indicator up to 64 hours. There's fantastic guilloche work on the movement itself. The undercarriage of the tourbillon is steel, entirely black polished and beveled. Stripes on the bridges. We have black polished screws, solarization on the crown wheel core as well as the ratchet wheel. It's a pleasure to wind this watch. It's a pleasure to operate it. It has a little jumper right here for the date, and it's super wearable. It comes with a simple Daniel Roth brand pin buckle with a gold dial, a gold case, and a fantastic complicated tourbillon caliber. You wouldn't expect this watch to be so thin. It's well under 10 millimeters thick, and it easily slides underneath the cuff. It's nicely sized for him or for her, and I can envision this wearing really nicely on a wrist, even as small as 13.5 centimeters circumference. This is a late 2000s Daniel Roth watch, using a lot of the design conventions and watchmaking that the man himself developed from 1989 to 1994. The brand is coming back, and all of the work will be done through La Fabrique du Temps, which is Louis Vuitton's horlogerie branch. So this is a brand that's going places once again, revived, from what I understand, with the appreciation of Daniel Roth. Even though he's not specifically making the watches today, he has given his blessing, and he's happy to see his name back in circulation. But with watches like this, it was never truly out of circulation. The watch you see here was the product of a 15-year odyssey by watchmaker Nicolas Dehaene. He started with the prospect of a constant force escapement at Rolex back in the late 90s, and the project ELF got as far as the prototype stage and a patent which was filed but not followed through to registry. Because Rolex didn't follow through with the patent, he was able to leave, later join Gerard Breguet, and resume work on the idea with them. It didn't work because Rolex wanted to make the constant force device on the dial reliant on a metal buckling spring, and the system just wasn't consistently reliable. But with DRIE, deep reactive ion etching, a monoblock of silicon could be created to create the buckling blade that makes this constant escapement LM, constant force system, possible. So this ring you see in the iridescent purple blue, this is all silicon. We have a blade that moves across the center that's integral to that part, and it is only 14 microns thick, fractions of a human hair. Each one of these cam wheels begins to press down on the blade on each side. As it's pushed down, eventually it snaps, and it's that snap, that buckling point, that causes it to apply force to this rocker, which in turn is the lever that impulses the balance. As a result, the twin mainspring barrels, which you can see right here, they never directly power the escapement. Just like a playing card that buckles in your hand as you compress it and then press it back and forth, this blade buckles, and it's the buckling action of the blade, which always entails the same amount of force, that allows this caliber 9100 to create constant force for 6 days. It's a beautiful system, elegant and ingenious, that won the GPHG Egidor back in 2013 as the best watch of the year. Now, this model came out in 2014. It's the rose gold version of the constant escapement LM. So 48 millimeters in diameter. It's a little bit weird because you wind it counterclockwise. 2 mainspring barrels. It's got a power reserve of 6 days with a power reserve indicator. Formally, this is part of the Bridges series. You can see the Golden Bridge style bridge used. It's ubiquitous in the GP lineup, and it's ubiquitous on this watch with several different applications. If you look carefully, you can see that the beveling, the satination, the media blast, the black polish on the screws, all of this is world-class finish. It's just grayscale, so you could miss it, but when you get close, it's as finished, as fine as any Patek. And you can see there's a lovely double ratchet pocket wheel style or pocket watch style click to prevent the system from running backwards, and I adore that. That is exactly as it would have been on the Golden Bridge tourbillon pocket watches of the 19th century at Gerard Breguet. We have a white lacquered dial, center seconds, and when you throw this watch on the wrist, it's got a hell of a lot of presence. I do believe you need a wrist a little larger than mine. 17 or 18 centimeters circumference would wear this well, but at 48 millimeters, it's just a bit too big for me. That said, big is sort of the style, so you don't need a huge wrist to wear this. You want it to be visible. You want it to be conspicuous, to draw questions and admiration. So just a slightly bigger wrist than mine, and you can pull this off. All right, what could possibly top that? Well, I always like to save the most spectacular watch for last, and today it is this Minerva-built Montblanc Collection Villeret 1858 vintage chronograph. Minerva was built up under Italian ownership during the 2000s to become a sort of low-volume Patek Philippe rival, only they went way past that mandate. Chaotic from a business standpoint, but beautiful from a watchmaking perspective, the company was on shaky financial footing until Richemont bought it in 2006. In 2007, 10 years after the first Montblanc branded watch was made, Minerva was given to Montblanc effectively as its horlogerie branch, and while the Leloc manufacturer of Montblanc can make 100,000 watches a year, the Villeret factory, Minerva, can only make a few hundred. So hundreds of thousands versus hundreds, and this comes from that group of hundreds. It is 43.5 millimeters in white gold, gray gold, the kind that never needs to be rhodium plated. It's a 58-piece limited edition. It has a double scale dial with Breguet Arabic numerals, telemeter for gauging distance, snailed tachymeter for gauging speed, mono pusher chronograph. Take a look. The Montblanc logo is actually an insert of mother of pearl in the crown, and it is an absolute pleasure to operate. This is the finest column wheel feel I've ever encountered, and Minerva is a true manufacturer. This movement is 37 millimeters in diameter. And as you can see, it's a classical column wheel, lateral clutch chronograph, manual wind, 55-hour power reserve, a big, slow 2.5 hertz balance that's almost the radius of the movement. And this was originally designed as a pocket watch chronograph caliber in the first half of the 20th century. The design of the watch is inspired by Minerva chronographs from the 1910s through 1930s. And then on the reverse side, you have a movement that's literally drawn from that era. There's even an overcoil hairspring for concentric breathing of the hairspring in any position. Both steel and brass parts here are finished to the highest standards you will encounter anywhere. Take a look. We have on the chronograph bridge a super sharp interior angle, and not just one, but 1, 2, 3. On the edges of all the steel components, we have the same level of beveling or anglage as we have on the brass parts, and it's much harder to do this on steel. You can see that every screw head, every single one, has been black polished. There's satination across the top of the steel chronograph components, and then stripes across the brass parts. You can see that the ratchet wheel has been broadly solarized, and that if we get close to it, you can even see that the teeth of the crown wheel and the ratchet wheel have been internally micro-beveled. You could see part of the chronograph architecture features a little arrow or devil's tail that's actually a symbol of the Minerva brand. And I'll get as close as I can without spoiling that. You can see that it has exquisite outward tips where the bevels meet. Hard to do on steel, harder still on a tiny component like this. It's literally the size of a flea on the back of the watch. And the feel of this column wheel is worth the price of admission. It's a big watch, but it's wearable. Throwing it on my wrist, you can see my wrist 16 centimeters circumference. I embrace this, and I would actually say this fits me. Big is the look because it's got a pocket watch movement inside, so how petite would you expect it to be? This is the 1629 caliber, and it makes the watch thin, easily fit underneath the cuff. It's just broad across the wrist. This is the most exciting chronograph that's crossed my desk this year. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details of any watch you see on today's show.